morning of December 30th, 1978, the snow in Littleton, Colorado was fresh and clean. On South Franklin Street, the kind of street where everyone knows everyone's dog's name, the Spangler house sat quiet. Too quiet. A neighbor named Ken Fagan had been keeping an eye on the place. The newspapers were piling up. The mail was overflowing. He knocked. No answer. He walked around back, peered through a window. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. In an upstairs bedroom, 15-year-old Susan Spangler lay partially clothed in her bed. She had been shot in the back. In the next room, her 17-year-old brother David was also in bed. He had been shot once in the upper chest. And in the basement, slumped over her typewriter, was 45-year-old Nancy Spangler, wife, mother, homemaker, with a bullet wound high on her forehead. A suicide note, typed on the very machine she died on, was signed with her initial N. It looked like a murder-suicide, a broken woman who killed her children and then herself. The kind of tragedy that makes you shake your head and thank God it happened to someone else. But here's what the neighbor didn't see. Here's what the sheriff's deputies missed. Here's what the coroner ruled and closed and forgot. The man who lived in that house, the husband, the father, the part-time DJ with the radio voice and the easy smile, had just pulled off the perfect crime. His name was Robert Spangler, and he would live next door to unsuspecting neighbors for another 21 years before the truth finally caught up with him. To understand the mask Robert Spangler wore so well, you have to go back to where the mask was molded. Ames, Iowa, the heart of the Midwest, a place where reputation was currency and family names meant something. Robert Merlin Spangler was born on January 10, 1933 in Des Moines, but raised in Ames. His father, Merlin Grant Spangler, was no ordinary man. He was a civil engineer, a professor at Iowa State University, a respected figure in his field. Today, a laboratory at Iowa State still bears his name. Imagine growing up in the shadow of a building with your father's name on it. Imagine the weight of that, the expectation, the pressure to be someone worthy of that name. Robert was a football player in high school, popular, good-looking. The kind of boy who fit in without trying. And it was in those hallways of Ames High that he met her, Nancy Jane Stallman, the girl next door, the homecoming queen of his own private story. They were the couple everyone expected to get married. And in 1955, they did. Robert was 22. Nancy was 22. They moved to Colorado, Littleton, a growing suburb of Denver.
I do.
And they set about building the American dream.
You look so handsome.
But here's the thing about dreams.
I do.
They're fragile.
Beautiful.
And the man building this one had already learned the most dangerous lesson a person can learn. That appearance is everything. That what people see matters more than what is real. By the 1960s and 70s, Robert Spangler had become something of a local Renaissance man. He worked for Honeywell's Camera and Instruments division, a solid, respectable job. He served as public relations director for a nonprofit organization. But it was his side gigs that made him memorable. He had a voice made for radio, rich, warm, trustworthy. He worked part-time as a disc jockey, spinning records and chatting between songs. People recognized that voice around town. And then there was the theater. Robert Spangler was an actor. He loved the stage. He performed in dinner theater productions, taking on roles that let him become someone else for a few hours. Years later, he would play John Hancock in a production of 1776, a founding father, a man of history, The irony would have been lost on him. To the neighbors on South Franklin Street, Bob Spangler was just Bob. He mowed his lawn. He waved. He had a wife and 2 kids and a split-level house with a basement where he kept his guns. But actors know something the rest of us forget. The best performances are the ones where you never see the actor at all. Just the character. And Robert Spangler was about to give the performance of a lifetime. By 1978, the Spangler marriage had been running on fumes for years. 23 years of marriage, 2 teenagers, a house in the suburbs, and a wife who, by all accounts, was struggling. Nancy Spangler was 45 years old. She had devoted her life to her family, but now her children were nearly grown. David was 17, a senior in high school. Susan was 15, just beginning to carve out her own identity. And Nancy, what was left for Nancy? There were rumors of depression, of a woman who felt trapped, who maybe drank too much, who maybe wasn't the partner Robert wanted anymore, because Robert had found someone else. Her name was Sharon Cooper. She worked with him, colleague, confidant, then lover. She was everything Nancy wasn't, exciting, new, unburdened by 2 decades of shared history. Robert fell in love. Or what passed for love in a man whose primary concern was his own happiness. He decided he wanted out. He wanted Sharon, he wanted a fresh start. But divorce? Divorce was messy. Divorce was expensive. Divorce meant splitting assets, paying alimony, explaining to the community why the perfect family on South Franklin Street wasn't so perfect after all. Divorce meant admitting failure. And Robert Spangler, the son of a man with a building in his name, could not fail. Not publicly, not ever. So he began to think, to plan, to calculate. In his mind, a solution began to form, a terrible, permanent solution that would leave him free, clear, and sympathetic. The only question was, could he really do it? The answer, as we now know, was yes. On the morning of December 30th, 1978, the Spangler house was waking up slowly. Christmas was 5 days past. The tree was still up, needles starting to drop. The kids were home for winter break. Robert Spangler had a plan, and it started with a lie. He approached Nancy, told her he had a surprise for her, something in the basement. She followed him down the stairs, probably curious, probably hoping, after all these years, that maybe he still had a romantic bone in his body. He didn't. When they reached the basement, Robert produced the surprise all right, a .38 caliber handgun. He raised it, and he shot his wife of 23 years, high on the forehead. Nancy slumped over the typewriter, dead instantly. Or maybe not. Maybe she lingered for a moment, her blood mixing with the ink on the keys. We'll never know. Robert didn't stop to find out. He had more work to do. Upstairs, 15-year-old Susan was still in bed, partially clothed, probably asleep, probably dreaming of boys and music and the future. Her father entered her room. He shot her in the back. Next door, 17-year-old David, in his bed, shot once, in the upper chest. But David wasn't dead. The bullet hadn't killed him. He was lying there, his young body broken, his eyes maybe open, maybe looking at his father with confusion and terror. Robert Spangler looked at his son, his namesake, the boy he had raised, coached, fed, and tucked in for 17 years. And then he picked up a pillow, and he pressed it down over David's face, and he held it there until the struggling stopped. When it was over, the house was silent. 3 bodies. 1 gun, 1 father. Robert Spangler did not panic. He did not weep. He got to work. Robert Spangler had been an actor. He understood staging. He understood that a scene had to tell a story. He positioned the bodies. Susan in her bed, David in his, Nancy in the basement. Then he sat down at the typewriter, the machine his wife had used 1,000 times, and he typed a suicide note. He signed it with her initial N. The note would explain everything. A depressed woman, a broken marriage, a mother who snapped and took her children with her into the darkness. He left the gun near her body. He turned on the radio to a religious station, perhaps to suggest a mind-seeking solace. And then he walked out the door. But first, he did one more thing. He called his lover, Sharon Cooper, told her he was coming, told her they could finally be together. For 12 days, the house on South Franklin Street sat silent. The lights were on, Robert had left them blazing, but no one came or went. The mail piled up. The newspapers stacked on the driveway. Finally, on January 3rd, 1979, a neighbor named Ken Fagan couldn't ignore it anymore. He called the sheriff. When deputies arrived, they found the scene exactly as Spangler had arranged it, and they bought it, hook, line, and sinker. The Arapahoe County coroner ruled it a double homicide-suicide. Nancy Spangler, they concluded, had shot her children and then herself. Case closed. There were loose ends, of course. The gun belonged to Robert. Gunshot residue was found on his right palm. He failed 2 private polygraph exams. The results deemed inconclusive. He changed his story about where he was that morning, but the coroner's ruling was the official story. And in 1979, you didn't argue with the official story. The evidence was returned to Spangler, or destroyed, and Robert Spangler walked free. 7 months later, he married Sharon Cooper. They moved into the same house on South Franklin Street, the house where Nancy, David, and Susan had died. And life went on. Sharon Cooper married Robert Spangler, believing she had found a good man, a grieving widower, a survivor of tragedy. She had no idea she had married a killer. They shared a passion, hiking. The couple spent weekends and vacations exploring trails, climbing mountains, breathing the thin, clean air of the American West. Sharon loved it so much she wrote a book about her experiences, hiking the Grand Canyon. For 9 years they built a life. But slowly the cracks began to show. Sharon started to notice things, odd things. She told people she began to believe that Robert was out to get her, a chilling phrase that takes on new meaning now. In 1988, they divorced. Sharon moved out. Robert moved on. But in 1993, after the death of his third wife, Robert reconnected with Sharon. She moved back into his Colorado home. Perhaps she thought they could rekindle something. Perhaps she thought the past was past. On the 2nd of October, 1994, Robert found her unresponsive in the house, next to a bottle of Tylenol. She died later that day. Drug overdose, the authorities ruled. No, investigated. Robert collected $20,000 from her life insurance policy. Was it murder? The 4th unnatural death surrounding Robert Spangler. He always denied it, even his confinement. But the pattern is there. The money is there. The timing is there. Sharon Cooper's death remains the one in the tapestry of Robert Spangler's crimes. The one death he was never charged with. In August 1990, Robert Spangler married again. Her name was Donna Ray Marsh Sundling. She was 58 years old, an aerobics instructor, vibrant and fit. She had 5 grown children and numerous grandchildren. She was full of life. Donna didn't share Robert's love of hiking. In fact, she had a fear of heights. It made her nervous, the edges of cliffs, the drop-offs, the void, but loved a canyon. He wanted to share it with her, by 1993, their marriage was in trouble. Donna's fear of hiking had become a point of contention. They fought about it, but Robert proposed a solution, a trip to the Grand Canyon, a chance to reconnect, a chance to save their marriage. Donna was reluctant, but she agreed. Maybe she thought it would bring them closer. Maybe she thought facing her fear would prove her love. She had no idea that her husband was planning something else entirely. Robert later told investigators that he had made a decision. Killing Donna would be easier than divorce. Cheaper too. No alimony. No splitting assets. No messy explanations. Just a tragic accident, a grieving widower, and a fresh start. On the 11th of April, 1993, they set out on the trail. Donna was carrying a camera. Robert was carrying a secret. Robert's point of view, watching, calculating. The trail to Horseshoe Mesa is beautiful and terrifying. It winds along the edge of the canyon, with drops of hundreds of feet, just steps away. For someone with a fear of heights, it would have been an ordeal. Donna Spangler faced that ordeal for her husband. She trusted him. She followed him along the trail, her heart pounding, her eyes on the path. At some point, they stopped. Robert suggested taking a picture. The view was spectacular, the kind of shot you remember forever. Donna turned to face him, the camera in her hands, the canyon yawning behind her. What happened next? We know only because Robert Spangler finally told us. He looked at his wife. She looked at him, and then he pushed. She fell 160 feet. Her body slammed into rock, over and over, until it came to rest far below. The autopsy later revealed massive injuries, abrasions, contusions, lacerations, multiple fractures of the neck, chest, and lower extremities. Donna Sundling Spangler, mother of 5, grandmother of many, aerobics instructor, woman afraid of heights, died alone at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, pushed by the man who had promised to love her. Robert Spangler did not scream. He did not cry. He did not scramble down to help. He calmly continued down the trail to the ranger station and reported that his wife had fallen while posing for a picture. He was so calm, so composed, so believable. The rangers ruled it an accident, another tragedy in the life of Robert Spangler. He gave interviews, national television interviews. He sat on couches and looked into cameras with sad eyes and talked about the dangers of hiking, about how quickly life can change, about how much he missed his dear wife Donna. America watched, America sympathized, and Robert Spangler went home to collect the insurance money. Script. By 1999, Robert Spangler had married again. Her name was Judy Hilty. They had been together less than a year. He was still acting in dinner theater. He played John Hancock that summer. He still refereed youth soccer games. He still seemed like the nicest guy on the block. But something was wrong. He was forgetting his lines. He was tired. He went to the doctor. The diagnosis was devastating. Lung cancer and brain cancer. Terminal. He was given 6 months to live. When word leaked out, a group of investigators from 3 different agencies, the National Park Service, the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, saw an opportunity. They had suspected Robert Spangler for years. The 1,978 deaths, the Grand Canyon accident, the overdose of Sharon Cooper. But they had no evidence, no confession. A dying man, they reasoned, might want to clear his conscience. Or maybe, just maybe, a narcissist might want to brag before he went to his grave. They approached him at his home in Grand Junction. He agreed to talk. They brought him to the local sheriff's office, and they began to interview him. On the first day, Spangler was cagey. He admitted nothing, but he was intrigued. The investigators told him that FBI profilers wanted to study him, that he was a unique kind of killer. That appealed to his ego. He went home that night and thought about it. The next morning, he called them back. He wanted to continue. The investigators had built something crucial: rapport. They treated him not as a monster, but as a subject of interest. And Robert Spangler, the actor, the performer, the man who had fooled everyone for 21 years, couldn't resist the chance to take a final bow. Robert later told investigators that he had made a decision. Killing Donna would be easier than divorce. Cheaper, too. No alimony. No S.